Bitcoin's at least worth $700 billion in terms of market cap. The fact that it has more functionality than Visa and MasterCard should give it some multiple of what Visa and MasterCard are valued at.
What makes Bitcoin so valuable? Because what's backing Bitcoin? Is it because there's a finite number of it? What you mentioned earlier, what makes the value? Because technically there's no nothing backing the US dollar, right, anymore, because we went off the gold standard, and it's basically backed by your belief or my belief or another nation's belief that this country can pay back this money. What makes cryptocurrency? What's backing cryptocurrency? Is it gold as well, or something else?
Yeah, no. So there's no gold backing it. It's literally there's no physical component to Bitcoin. So I think that's something that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around, and rightfully so. My mom, it took her like 5 years to ever touch Bitcoin, because she said, I just can't get this concept that I can't touch it. I can't order a Bitcoin and hold it. I said, yeah, I get that. And the reason there's two types of people in this world. There's people that are called digital immigrants, which is our parents' generation. And then there's digital natives, which I believe you and I are kind of in that cross between the Gen Z people. They're digital natives, like everything digital. Their lives are on TikTok. Their lives are, in basically the metaverse almost at this point. And then there's those people that are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s that are kind of in between. And so maybe it's a little bit easier for us. Maybe it's sometimes harder for us. But to go to your point, what makes it valuable? The ledger itself is actually part of that. And I have a whole chapter devoted to this in the book. So if you're thinking, wow, he only, spent a minute talking about this, there's at least a chapter's worth of content here as far as why it's valuable. But I would say, in my opinion, I have kind of some libertarian leanings in terms of political philosophy, and I think that the censorship resistance of Bitcoin is a really compelling case, especially with what we've seen in the last year. I don't know how but are you familiar with that Canadian trucker convoy that happened?
Yes.
I think it was early 2022. Yeah. So, yeah.
So what, for my audience, what he's talking about, there was in Canada, there were some truckers who had blocked off an entire intersection, and they weren't doing anything. They weren't harming anyone. They were just kind of gathering together socially, and they were kind of protesting because they weren't making deliveries. They weren't working. They were just protesting and gathered together. And Canada got together and tried to stop them exchange wise, and had to do a lot of things and get law enforcement involved later on. But initially they couldn't do anything. And they had a GoFundMe page. Go check it out. But one of the things they were able to communicate with was cryptocurrency. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that was perfect. I appreciate the tee up. And so, yeah, to your point, people don't realize how many intermediaries they are, like we were talking about earlier, in their money. So GoFundMe, people raise donations for truckers to buy fuel and food and all this stuff to keep the protests going. Say, hey, go exercise your free speech. And yeah, you're not hurting anybody. Just go ahead and exercise your free speech. GoFundMe didn't like the point of their protest. And so GoFundMe actually shut that down. They said, you know what, we're not going to give funds to people. So there's an incidence of a third party kind of getting in the middle and blocking the transaction. So they sent the money back to all the donors, and the truckers didn't get anything. Then the next step was there was another one called Give, Send, Go. So another donation platform stepped up. They said, you know what, we're for free speech. We will send the transactions, or we will send the donations. They collected $4 million or something worth of donations. Then they went and sent them to the truckers. The Canadian government at that point then said, anybody that's either giving a donation or receiving a donation, we're going to freeze your bank account. And if they classified it under the Emergencies Act, I believe, as like funding terrorism or something. It was something kind of absurd. And they said, you know what, you could go to jail if you give these. So there's an example of GoFundMe blocked the transaction because a private company didn't like it. Then Canada, even when a private company wanted to help, Canada said, no, we're going to block it. So to me, the value proposition of Bitcoin is tremendous, because what happened next was people started sending in Bitcoin donations, and they kept this protest going. The government couldn't stop it. Now, there were headlines that said the government was freezing people's crypto accounts, but that just wasn't true. There's online exchange accounts. So like if you have Coinbase, which is a popular exchange, that's a regulated institution. Those types of things can be frozen. But if you have a Bitcoin wallet on your phone, or if you have a Bitcoin wallet on your computer, there's nothing that anybody can do to stop that transaction. And so, yeah, Bitcoin is censorship resistant. People weren't able to stop transactions because of that. So just that's one component. Like I said, there's 10 components like that of why Bitcoin has inherent value. Bitcoin, I believe, has inherent value. People say, oh, gold has inherent value because it has industrial use. You can make a bowl out of it, or you can use it for electronics and things like that. Well, that's only about 15% of gold's use is in industrial uses. So most of it's because people hold it as a store of value. I would say that censorship resistance is actually an inherent value to Bitcoin that no other form of money, there's no other form of money on the face of the planet that could have done that to keep that protest going. So yeah, it's one isolated incident. But if I ever have an elevator ride with somebody and they ask me, why is Bitcoin important? Because that whole censorship resistance argument takes 2 minutes, like it like was right there. But the elevator pitch that I'll give to somebody in 30 seconds, they say, well, Bitcoin, it's valueless. Why? There's no value to it. I'd say, how much do you think Visa, MasterCard, and American Express are worth? And they'll say, I don't know, probably hundreds of billions of dollars. I say, you're right. They're worth like $700 billion. Why do you think, why do they have value? Well, because they send money all over the world. Okay, well, that's just a few credit card companies here in the United States. And you're assessing, the market assesses that those inherently have $700 billion worth of value. The act of sending money has value. And so we could say at its base level, Bitcoin being able to send money to anybody on Sunday, you can't send money from your bank on Sunday. You can send money from Bitcoin 24/7, 365. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas morning and your friend in Ukraine needs some money, you can do that. And there's no border. You can actually send money under the most sanctioned nations in the world. Israel, somebody in Israel can send money to somebody in Iran whenever they want. There's no way to do that with any other form of money. So not only can Visa and MasterCard, are they worth something because you can send money, but you actually have more freedom to send money with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's at least worth $700 billion in terms of market cap. So the fact that it has more functionality than Visa and MasterCard should give it some multiple of what Visa and MasterCard are valued at.
Makes sense. You guys, you need to check out that story, because it was really something. When I got wind of it, with the truckers and the Canadian government getting a hold of their information and putting a stop, GoFundMe blocked them, like Mr. Mint said. But then it was really interesting, because then there were points where the government, I think, subpoenaed some of those agencies to give up the names and bank accounts of the individuals sending money and receiving money. And that's how they were able to classify who's actually doing terrorism under that bill that they passed. Like it was crazy, because the government got together and their political party, and they said, we need to stop this. And some hacking got involved, which was crazy. You wouldn't think your government would hack your information, but it got out. And some of those people, they tried to really get into the names of who was sending money and who was and GoFundMe and Coinbase, they have to respond, because, like you said, those are big institutions that are regulated by those same governments, so they have to respond. The government can ask them, give me the names of who sent the money, and that's scary when you think of it. So that again has value to it.